the executive Playbook in proud association with Hennessy XO. Each drop is an odyssey.
They're the ones who can see potential where others only see insurmountable challenges. But beyond the vision, they're also the ones who make things happen, who bring about change that can alter the fortunes of a city and its people. He's been called the unofficial mayor of Braamfontein, and after almost 20 years of hard slog, Adam Levy is still going strong in his pursuit of turning the area into a truly integrated, thriving metropolitan hub to rival the world's most vibrant inner cities. I must tell you, as I drove in today, I was actually reminded of my visits and trips to a neighbor goods market, and I thought to myself, goodness, how times have changed. And maybe let's start there, right in the midst of a pandemic, which has really rocked not only our lives, but our livelihoods as well. What's the experience been like for you, firstly, from a personal point of view? And then if we extend to actually take a look at your property portfolio and the property environment in South Africa overall.
Well, I think naturally this is a very uncertain time for everybody. Seemingly no answers somehow, and every week there's some new calamity or new complexity, a new complication. And it really touches into this idea that you have to be enterprising and that you perpetually have to have something to keep you motivated. And however many obstacles get thrown in your way, you need to find ways of either circumventing them or leaping over them. But ultimately, you really have to have belief that it's in the pursuit of something worthwhile.
So what are your motivators that have kept you going thus far?
Well, I believe that this is an instrumental tool for transformation in the city. I came in here, I started up, and it wasn't because I had some great idealistic vision on transformation of the inner city or creating a big property portfolio. It was a deficiency that I felt in my own life. I just didn't think that there were enough opportunities to meet dynamic people. And through the processing of that as a young person, I was able fortuitously to create this thing. And I still firmly believe that that is the thing that will get us, not only through this, but this is the thing that will get us globally renowned and recognized again, because I think the South African story is a very unique one.
Let's talk about your journey, looking to transition and alter the lives of dynamic people, as you refer to them. Is it a decision that you look back on and are still proud about the developments that you've made here thus far?
Absolutely. I went to Wits University, was literally on the doorstep, and it was such a binary experience for me. I felt like I was at home or at university, and I actually, quite frankly, at the time was more at home. And that was the experience. I didn't even know that Braamfontein existed, truthfully. The university campus culture at the time didn't really have an interface with the world of the inner city. It was in the mid-1990s, and the city was flatlining. And it just really felt devoid of experience. And all these things germinate. These are the things that, trouble us, they perplex us, but they're also the things that fuel us ultimately. So, we're a multitude of all of the different seeds that we take on, and eventually, thankfully, some of them start to sprout. And for me, the Braamfontein tale and story was this opportunity that through the inherent and acute awareness of the deficiency that I experienced at my university life, that there was an opportunity to do something quite transformational for an entirely different generation.
And others would say that that's very innovative and entrepreneurial thinking, right? Would you go back to that and perhaps pull out a few lessons that we can learn, raising the capital in order to purchase properties that I believe you said back then were literally just being given away at rather discounted prices?
It's hard to even imagine back that the time existed like that. There's been so much history of ups and downs and transformation in Braamfontein, the city, and South Africa in general. For me, the belief was the overriding driver. I don't know what it was, and it's because I'd spent a year traveling around the world backpacking. I remember reading The Alchemist, actually, when I was backpacking. The premise of the book is this idea that an individual's pursuit in finding that individual's happiness. It's not really about conforming or finding some prescriptive way of living or living in someone else's shadow. It's really about finding your own voice. And I still, it's either entirely, sheer naivety, which is a really good starting point at the beginning of any type of entrepreneurial journey, but it doesn't last long enough. Eventually you get wily enough to recognize that these challenges are real and you can't wish your way through them. And that really is something that helps to perpetually drive you into a position where you can make change.
And maybe that helps us understand a little bit more about you as an individual and as a leader. You studied law, but as you've highlighted, we all have multiple facets to us, right? And someone who has great passion for the arts and yet found themselves finding a lead and business activity within the property environment. What is it about all these different facets of life and areas that give you that edge or that excite you to continue to pursue more lessons and developments here?
The lesson, the takeaway from this is that life isn't binary. We aren't one or the other. And this is sometimes a failure for all of us, even for people who are successful. That you can fall into something by luck or just entirely fortuitously, and then you become so proficient in it. You put your 10,000 hours in and you start to really genuinely believe that you have some type of expertise in a field. And then that kind of sticks to you. The environment around you. People, through the osmosis of experience, think you are an authority in a field. And I think it's always important to recognize that it just happens to be something that you've done for really long that's given you the experience of understanding things in ways that most other people don't know, because it's the volume of experience that you've had and all the lessons that you've learned. I think it's pivotal for a human to continue to develop. We've got to ask ourselves the questions. We've got to put ourselves into unfamiliar territory. But
let's be honest, that's not always easy, right, Adam? Because it's uncomfortable, we fear uncertainty, and we also suffer from imposter syndrome, right? So are those particular challenges that you've also had to go through and perhaps experience certain lessons as to how to go through them effectively?
I don't know what it is about it, but I feel like I got lucky finding Braamfontein. For whatever reason, I did my law articles here, and I was really dissatisfied with my experience of living in Johannesburg, which is why I went backpacking in the first place. I just wanted to go and understand what was beyond the boundaries, what were beyond the borders. I knew that there was more to life, and it just felt dull and boring. I think that was the initial seedling, and it was like, how do I experience life differently, and how can I find a way of propelling myself into this world that I want to experience? And of course, there are challenges, there are complications, and there's always the uncertainty of doing things new and doing things that are challenging. But at that time, it was because I knew what I didn't want to do.
And right? What was that? Law?
I didn't want to pursue a career in law. So I went into law in the first instance because I wanted to emulate my father, who was a great South African lawyer. And I had such tremendous respect and admiration for him that I thought it was the natural thing. Like, I wanted to be like him. But the more I did it, the more I recognized that it wasn't my calling. It wasn't something that I can sincerely get out of bed every morning and I just wanted to jump up and go, hooray, let's get this day cracking.
Let's go battle a case in court today.
I could never do it. I try to force myself, but you can't force something that's not believable for your own soul long enough. And eventually you have to be a little bit introspective, and those are the things that compel you to make challenging choices. And this kind of popped up, all those stories about multiculturalism and interconnectivity and this magical, diverse world that I'd been experiencing traveling around the world became very evident in my head that this was something that I could conceivably, talk about being a nutter to even believe that was possible. But I genuinely believed that I somehow could bring this to life in an environment right in front of me. And I was able to do it very quickly after I'd even begun. So it was like this apprehension and uncertainty didn't linger for, a decade. It was like it was a year or two, and before I knew it, there was a universal consciousness about what people were experiencing in Johannesburg. There was this amazing opportunity, this wonderful synchronicity, and this thing started to happen. And it started to happen inside of me. It started to ferment, when I bought 1 or 2 buildings, and this thing came to life. And then I think everyone just wanted to experience it. It was just amazing timing.
The Executive Playbook, in association with Hennessy XO, celebrating personal and business success.
The Executive Playbook in proud association with Hennessy XO. Each drop is an odyssey.
I would like us to reflect on your journey within the property development space within Braamfontein, as well as Jozi, my Jozi, Central Johannesburg. It's a journey that's expanded for just shy of 2 decades, if I'm not mistaken. Met with right? Sounds quite
thereabouts.
Do you feel that old?
I don't feel old ever.
I like that response. So since you don't feel old ever, and it's really been an experience that has molded and shaped a lot of conversations around the gentrification of cities such as Johannesburg, I know that there's been a lot of tension that you've raised with many partners as to how we can continue to develop this particular metropolitan city. Are those conversations that are still taking place at the moment? And do you believe that there might still be a few challenges or blockages to the advancements of cities like Johannesburg to make sure that diversified individuals, diversified cultures, and very dynamic people can continue to meet in this melting pot?
Listen, I think it's imperative that we find a way. Every country in the world has to have, a multiplicity of cities that are functional. This is the biggest city in South Africa, and it needs to function. And this is probably one of the, I wouldn't say a regret, but it's been the disappointments about my experience of being in the city, is that the city forefathers or the people who are responsible for the disbursements of capital haven't really realized that cities are these long-term animals that you really need to nurture appropriately. It's not just about for today and for us. It's about for tomorrow and for an entirely new generation that will be here in 10, 20, 30 years. And you have to forecast for that. And while you're forecasting, you also need to be mindful of what's happening today. You need to work to some sort of direction. So we've spent so much time in Johannesburg in the last 20 years being kind of reactive. And that's a very wasteful place for any commercial person to be in, because all you're doing is putting out fires. And where we really need to start to think about being smarter is being almost directionally proactive. We need to find the things that are the catalyst to making change over here. And you need to also fuel your community and your culture. You need to give these people hope that 10 years' time from now, it's worth investing my money. There's going to be a return of whatever it is. And this is just from a commercial front, but you've also got to make these things sexy and alluring and fun-filled. And that's really been what my business has always been about. That's the Play Braamfontein. This business has really been focused on the human side of things. It's never really been focused on the commercial aspect of it.
But I find it so interesting because many people might look at you and say, oh, but you're a property developer. Of course you have commercial interests at heart. And whilst that does play a factor, as you say, it's about the people, it's about the human investment, it's about the hope. Why is that so important to you as an entrepreneur?
The commerciality doesn't operate in a silo, especially in the cultural, artistic environment in Johannesburg. It's never really, regrettably, and this is something I'm quite saddened by, it's never grown massively exponentially. It always feels like you're talking to a similar sized community over and over and over again. They might change kind of, every 5 years, whatever, but it's the same volume. And that's troubling because, if I thought about where we would be today in Braamfontein, it's not like today, 17 years down the line, I would be sure in my head that we would have been a world-class, phenomenal destination. And I didn't think that that would be the case with this revisionist view of it all. I had that as a genuine understanding of what was going to happen. I thought it would happen 2 or 3 years after I'd even started. So you can talk about like naivety or a courage or whatever the phraseology that goes into having this belief, because that is an important driving force to making it a reality. But the city hasn't done enough. It hasn't done enough to be the tool that it is. And the tool that the city is it needs to be supportive of commercial enterprise, of entrepreneurs, of the people who are willing to take their time, invest their money and know-how into doing all the sorts of things that the city does not have the skill to do. The city needs to ensure that there's safety and security. The city needs to ensure that there's, functional roads and there aren't potholes and that there are working lights. Those are the sorts of things that you should just almost rely on the fact that you don't need to trouble yourself with. Mm-hmm. But the reality has been that you've had to expend an inordinate amount of time and energy and money doing all the sorts of things supplementing a system's deficiency. And that's where I hope somewhere along the line we get right, because not everyone's built with the same measured degree of resilience. Ultimately, you get knocked down enough, you give up. Maybe that's the variance in the degree of entrepreneurship. A lot of what this has been about is about reformulating yourself with such phenomenal regularity that you, at the very least, could give off the illusion that you're moving sideways and not backwards, which is what has been happening regrettably a lot in South Africa in the last 10 years.
Adam, when we talk about safety as well as security that you mentioned, Braamfontein's in a very unique positioning. This particular node is surrounded by areas that don't necessarily have a great perception when it comes to safety. So how have you managed some of those challenges and sought to overcome them?
Well, I got to say that's probably the biggest complexity of doing this here, has been the perception. And it's not because we aren't doing things that I think are quite dynamic, because they are. As I said, it takes 100 different visits into the city to reassure people. It takes one bad experience to unfurl all of that work. And because of our location, because of our proximity to what's perceived to be, these crime-ridden environments, or, places that are riddled with riots and things of that nature, are very unnerving for people that are already kind of tentative. We haven't really had the appropriate countenance to this message. We haven't had like a firmament of a messaging platform in the media until now, where we can tell people the truth. And the truth is, this is a dynamic hub. There's some exceptional content over here. There's some amazing storytellers, probably more unique than anywhere else in this country, quite frankly. And we're doing things now that I think are going to be really transformative. We have rolled out the first 24-hour camera surveillance environment in the inner city in this little node of Braamfontein. And, I really can't wait, like all of us, for COVID to end and for these lockdowns to end, so that thousands of people can come back here and enjoy all of the new content that we've got lined up for them. I'm beyond excited about that.
So with the benefit of hindsight, looking at the challenges that you've experienced in the last 2 decades, and of course seeing humans struggle with a sense of resilience due to the uncertainty that we're in this current environment, what are you hopeful for the future that keeps you going and not giving up?
I'm not engineered to give up. It's just not in my lexicon of language. So, and it's also a recognition about what makes us human, and not only what makes everyone human, but what makes the South African human.
Oh, South Africans are complex, aren't we?
No, we're more complex than we really appreciate, because there are so many variant versions of us, and I don't think we often focus on enough of our commonality. It's been too easy, certainly for politicians, to focus on our difference. And that's a fundamental failing, because we're all South African and we all need to work to something together. And that thing is hope. We have to believe that tomorrow is better. We have to believe that there's a reason for what we do today and that we'll be rewarded for our efforts. I certainly try my best every single waking moment of my life in this business to be able to create and facilitate the platforms that allow people to experience that. That's what this business is all about.
A business of hope.
A business of hope, a business of facilitating environments that create the best of us. Talk about our diversities, ultimately getting to our commonality through the experience of the content that we create. That's what this is about.
The Executive Playbook, in association with Hennessy XO, celebrating personal and business success.
The Executive Playbook in proud association with Hennessy XO. Each drop is an odyssey.
Talking about success, talking about the best of what it is that we hope to create, I'm keen to get your thoughts on how you define success and if you believe you've attained success thus far.
I wouldn't say it's changed, but there are things that are much more overtly clear to me now. I love that success has been able to afford me freedoms. It's been able to give me the luxury of time. It's allowed me not to have to be answerable to a bigger system or to a boss. And it's also allowed me, thankfully, to not only have purpose, but to see out a vision. And there's something amazingly rewarding about that. I'm very mindful of the fact that, life's this perennial litany of irony, as I always say. When you're young, you want to be old, and when you're old, you want to be young, and we have money, you don't have time, and you have time, you don't have money, and there's always something out of kilter. And it's important, it's incumbent on each of us to stop and to really take stock, to be mindful of where our station is today. And that's what I think I've been able to do in the acknowledgement and recognition of my success, is that I get to do more of it. So your success doesn't need to breed success, but you need to use it wisely. And then giving back more of that and allowing people to be more understanding of what it means, the efforts it takes to get the success, the efforts it takes to continue to succeed.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because you also mentioned the element of paying it forward. And for many young South Africans, they might look at you and say, oh, well, Adam, you're male, you are white, you are in South Africa, so surely you must have received something that, might set you on a different path in terms of equity, but also in terms of equality. How is it that you engage with some of your counterparts who might be from different backgrounds, diversified experiences, diversified cultures, and even mindsets, to bring them on this journey of success and to walk along and understand some of the highlights that you've shared with us here today?
There's certain things about the world that we live in today which are so riddled in complexity. There are no right answers about how to deal with that. I am what I am. I can't be dismissive of the fact that this is the experience that I've had in my life. And I don't want to spend too much energy being apologetic for yesterday. I want to be able to be a contributor to a better tomorrow for everyone. This is a wonderful opportunity to reach out to the best of what South Africa has now in the talent department. If you need space or if you need venues, reach out and get in touch with us, because this is something that I actually have the capacity to do. And I do it all the time. We don't advertise to the world. We're not really great at our media foray into the universe.
But that's changing, because you're here now, aren't you?
Thank you. So I'm going to rely on you to get the messaging out there. I want people to really focus on the journey of what it's meant to do this. So this has been an exceedingly challenging cause, and it's not been helpful because of how I look. I promise you that for free. I don't want to spend any more energy in having to reassure people who don't believe that. You need to just recognize that this is performance-based. I don't suffer fools lightly. I find it massively challenging to accept and acknowledge that we need to live in any type of mediocrity. Probably the thing that most agrees me about almost my disappointments about how we live in this country. It's too easy to temper ourselves or to taper ourselves off to a lower standard. I genuinely believe that I'm a world-class citizen and I want to do world-class things. And I don't want to have to limit myself to an existing environment that might not want that for themselves. I want to find a way of elevating people, enough of them, to recognize that they can be the influencers, to pay it forward in the future, that we can all be dynamic instruments for this place.
And I think that's a powerful note to leave it on, and maybe also reflect on a lighter side to you, as you say, not only rebuilding the city, rebuilding this environment and rebuilding this country, but I also understand you like to build a few other things that might be sitting behind us. Maybe tell us about your passion for Lego, and if there are any analogies in terms of, this diverse platform and tool that is proven to be quite versatile that you implement in your own life and business experience, and if there are further learnings you can share with us there.
It's an interesting question. If I think back to this idea, Lego has been such a resolute, lingering part of my whole life. My fascination with Lego started when I was a little boy. And it's intriguing now to think about how much Lego I built during COVID, and lockdown. I was like, you're a grown man and you're playing with toys. I think the takeaway from this all, and this is the important really part of this journey, sometimes the things that we do, these hobbyist things on the side, a lot of people do all of these things on the side. It's like giving that little voice inside of you a gramophone and letting that thing be the voice of your experience in this life. If I look back, I'd had a fascination with building, with making things, with being tactile. And that has been a lingering part of my entire story. And I think it's important for all of us to recognize those little things that we might not have done from the time we were little, but we should remind ourselves about when there was no judgment or there was no compulsion or compunction to form part of a system where you could recognize that you could be like the alchemist. You could find the way of finding your individual happiness and let that be the voice that gets amplified.
Adam, it's such a pleasure engaging with you. Really different dynamics that you've shared with us, and most importantly, taking it back to us as individuals who are the front runners, are the entrepreneurs, are the individuals who are looking to change society and achieve joint success. Thank you so much for your time today. All the best building more Lego. I hope this isn't the tallest structure you've managed to come up with, though.
No, there's no more Lego for me. There's just real life and real buildings. I'm ready for it. And again, to use this platform as an invitation to invite people to reach out to us and to come and play in Braamfontein again.
Play Braamfontein, indeed. Brick by brick, continue building together.
Thank you so much.
The Executive Playbook in association with Hennessy XO, celebrating personal and business success.